all day, whether we realize it or not, we teach our children how to make choices. Sometimes with our inaction, we're teaching them to simply react and make bad choices, or mostly unconscious choices, actually. But we're always teaching them. It never stops. If we're present with them, we're teaching them. Sometimes children even can pick up on the tension in the house when you're not in the room, teaching them constantly. If we teach them wisely, if we love them and consciously teach them, oh my, it makes them strong, makes them confident, makes them who they are, actually more reveals who they are. It makes them capable of much more difficult choices when they're older. Constantly, every day, somebody calls me about their 18-year-old who's impossible, and I'm thinking, wow, if we had done this starting at age 6 months, we wouldn't have this problem. We really wouldn't. As I work in my garden, every day I see the results of a plant that was put in the wrong place, a plant that was at the wrong angle, a plant that's overshadowed by others. What happens in the beginning, later on, that tree's permanently bent. That tree permanently has foliage on one side. Or it was planted in the wrong soil, and that plant will never grow. To my embarrassment, I have several plants, not very many, but 3 or 4 in the backyard, that have looked the same for 20 years because I put them in the wrong soil. I keep meaning to go out there and save them, which regrettably probably means just pulling them up and throwing them on the burn pile. Those early decisions are everything. I asked my grandson, Bruce, who was 5 at the time, if he wanted to go with me on the ATV, the quad bike, for those of you who are from Europe, to dig water lilies out in the swamp, in the wild, natural ones, wild ones. And all he heard was ATV, which oddly, he hears those 3 letters, and when he put it in his brain, what came out was the 3 letters he was most used to hearing. So he calls it the GPS. Again, an example of early learning. So we're on the ATV, and he says, "Can you make the GPS float?" And I said, "Well, yeah." Because I'm thinking of the GPS device, like a Garmin. Yeah, if you put it, I guess, in a plastic container and float it on the water. And he's looking at me like, I'm having a hard time picturing putting the GPS, the ATV, in a plastic container. It's so fun being around kids and seeing the effect of choices and learning. So he just heard ATV, which is, of course, fun. And he was thrilled. So we get on the ATV and we're bouncing our way there, and we ran through a stream and water flooded up over my legs, and he's just laughing. We're having a great time. And then quite a while later, we get to the swamp at the end of a trail. Well, ATVs will go through a lot of mud and water and all kinds of stuff, but a full-fledged swamp, pretty much no. It just sort of slowly sinks, and swamps are famous for sucking down everything, cars, trucks. So we got to the swamp. I stopped just short of the swamp, and I got off and I headed for the water lilies. I'm just slogging my way through the mud. I looked behind me. I figured Bruce would follow me. He was back on the ATV, and I gave him a look like, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I want to go home." I said, "We will go home when I'm done digging these lilies. That's why we came. So in the meantime, you have 3 choices. You can come with me and dig in the mud." And he went, "No." Who knows why? Often he loves to just swim in the mud and get all nasty, but turns out he had on a pair of shoes that he liked, and he didn't want them to get all muddy. So that was the reason. I didn't know. I said, choice number 2, you can stay there on the ATV and complain at me. He shook his head. No, he didn't think that was smart. He tried complaining before, apparently. I said, or you can stay there and throw sticks in the water or sit on the ATV and, watch the dragonflies. You can just stay there and have a good time. And he nodded his head, yes, and he just stayed there. I finished digging the water lilies, but here's the remarkable thing. He had apparently been sufficiently taught about choices that once I enumerated his 3 choices, I didn't give him, there wasn't a 4th choice, go home. I told him, I'm going to dig the lilies. He never complained again, not once. He's 5. I don't know very many adults who wouldn't have sat there going, are you done yet? When are we going home? I'm bored. What else is there to do? And that's adults. Little children do that, most of them, pretty much all day. They whine about what they're not getting because people aren't listening to them and people aren't teaching them to choose. This was just beautiful to watch. Didn't matter whether he dug the water lilies. What do I care? He had a fun time anyway. He just didn't enjoy that particular part as much. So we watched dragonflies. New subject. A woman was talking to me about her business partner. And she is kind of the worker bee in the partnership. She orders things, produces stuff, delivers stuff on time. She's the executor, not in a bad way. She doesn't chop anybody's head off. And her partner is kind of like the idea person more. Concepts, creativity. And she complained that sometimes he gets involved in things where he doesn't know what he's doing. And then in her words, I get to pick up the pieces in the trail of destruction that he's leaving. So I said, do you want to stay partners? She said, well, I interrupted. I said, that wasn't an introduction to an essay. It was a yes or no question. Do you want to stay partners? Yes, no. Those are the 2 answers. She said, yeah, he really has some qualities I need that I don't do. I said, bingo. Then what you need is not a change in partners. In other words, external circumstances, which is what we're always looking for. That's why we control things. We'll be happy, we think, if we change our external environment. What would be far more useful, in my opinion, at least it's worth trying, is a change in perspective. Instead of thinking about picking up his messes, his trail of destruction, why not see it as you being you, executing things, making things happen, including cleanups. You be who you are while he's being who he is, which is the idea person who occasionally bumps into, pots and knocks them over and they break. While he's coming up with ideas. That's how he does it. She said, that's an interesting perspective. She wasn't annoyed anymore. That encapsulates what being a team is, really, or a partnership of any kind. Just happens that we're talking about a business partnership. It applies to personal partnerships, intimate partnerships, partnerships just in a conversation. Sometimes, to her, I said, you'll have to guide him away from the areas that are your responsibility so he doesn't, break too many pots. So he doesn't meddle and make unnecessary messes. But you don't resent him for that. He's being him. You value him for what he can do and can bring to your partnership. I don't make up for Donna's deficiencies, my partner. She doesn't make up for mine. We just combine assets, talents, skills, time, resources, and it works. We complement each other to ease. As opposed to, Why aren't you more like the inevitable me? It's an entirely different perspective. New subject. I know a couple who had been doing real love for years. And wow, when I met them, they were a mess, headed toward not being a couple. Argued, fought over everything, yelling, teasing, bullying, constant fear and tension in the house. A year ago, they decided to take real love seriously after doing it for years. The other day, I Skyped with them, and after a minute of banter, talking about her trip out of town, before he would have complained and said she did it at the wrong time and she didn't leave enough meals for him and blah, 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 forever. He said, he reached over and he touched her, talking about her time out of town. He said, I really love her. I thought I was going to die. And she said, I'm so glad to be home. Whoa, those words would never have been possible in all the years they'd known each other. Utterly impossible. All they did was complain. But these words are happening now, and it's magical. It's touching to see them. It's beautiful. Never give up in a partnership until you've at least tried the one thing that people and relationships need most. These two did it. Many others have too, but these two are a living example that I just saw actually earlier today. And they're pretty happy about it, that they did it, as opposed to continuing to fight, or like it's the three choices. Live with it and like it, which they were not doing. Live with it and hate it, which they were doing. Or leave it, which they were headed for. They chose live with it and like it, and they're still quite different from each other. Now, echoing the situation we just talked about before, they complement each other. Oh, it's worth it. New subject. I know a father whose daughter was just lost. Now she's considerably happier, but intermittently breaks the rules, like curfew, like associating with the, kind of people that wouldn't make her happy, occasionally drinks. And he writes, I'm getting it in my bones why anger is always wrong. There is no chance of feeling connected to anybody, much less my daughter, when the anger is present, even in what seems like a small amount of anger. Good for you. A small amount of anger is like a small amount of arsenic, like a small amount of sarin gas, which will kill you dead in, a minute. He continues, I told my daughter I was wrong about being angry last night, and the return of the connection was immediate. Wow. They'd always argued. Anger had never worked. He dropped the anger and just said I was wrong to be angry. Bingo, she forgave him. It was over. Then later, he says, the anger came back and the disconnection returned. It's as predictable as clockwork. Yeah, so's poison. Poison's in the air, you feel sick. If you're lucky and you remove the poison, you won't be sick. Sometimes it takes a while to heal from the poison. Mustard gas, for example. Terribly toxic poison, used in World War I in trench warfare. And we won't go into the gory details about how it works, but even when you remove it, then many people are sick for months and sometimes have pulmonary problems for the rest of their lives. But in this case, because your daughter really wants your love, when you remove the anger, poof, connected. You tried the anger again, disconnected. It's pretty predictable, like flicking a light switch. You continue. I was irritated with her this morning because she was being slow about getting ready for school when I had asked her to get ready early. When I tried to talk about it on the way to school, I could feel the disconnect. I don't like how it feels. that's when things change. We tend to respond less to, that's bad, somebody telling us that, or that breaks a principle, or you shouldn't. We don't do so well with that. But when we recognize that doing the, let's just call it wrong thing, unloving thing, doesn't feel good, then we stop it. I don't eat horse poop out of, restraint. I assume from the smell that it probably tastes like that, and I'm really not all that tempted. So you can, like you said, I don't like how that feels. I was thinking about it this morning and realized that most of my life I have spent in disconnect with anger. What a relief to not have to live that way all the time anymore. Well, if I had party balloons, then they would be falling from the ceiling. That's very cool. I'm really happy for you. New subject. Another father, turns out, writes, and he has a child who got pregnant. The child then had a spontaneous abortion. Didn't quite know how you say that correctly. The child had the spontaneous abortion, or the fetus had it. Well, anyway, there was a spontaneous abortion. How's that? Really had to make some changes. And he called me and he said, "Thank you for taking the time to visit with me yesterday. While I think that I've made progress in listening and reacting, it's clear that I can do much better. I have renewed hope." He said, "I've learned from this stress with my daughter. I've learned that I wasn't as calm as I thought." Good for you. You sound hopeful, and hope is the beginning. Why would we continue to change or learn or grow if we have no hope? So good for you. You continue. My wife and I read through the resources that you sent on the subject of anger, and wow, I've never seen so much material on that subject. Thank you. I must admit that I've been working on that vice for, in my whole life. Yeah, I kind of get it. And I admire your willingness. If I had to pick one quality in somebody I wanted to associate with, it would be that. Willingness. Willingness to learn. It doesn't matter where they are. If they're willing, cool. I've hired literally hundreds of people in my life, in my surgical practice, and I didn't care what their degree was. I didn't care what their certification was, training, nothing. Mostly we hired people off the street with high school degrees to do jobs that normally would require training as a registered nurse. All I was looking for was willingness to learn, because we can train a willing person to do almost anything, and they did. So it really is a vice, anger. It's an addiction. It's like a gun that we shoot people with. You continue. While I'm embarrassed by my anger at times, I feel as though progress is being made. Well, how does it get better than that? And I admire you. You don't need to be embarrassed. Anger is a very common reaction. You just do it automatically to pain. You get in pain, you get afraid, poof, anger. Anger is the reaction you learned. So is it even your fault? If it's a reaction, probably not. If I stab you in the leg with a fork and you react, is that your fault? Oh, it's the fork. Same with your anger. You're reacting to pain of a lifetime. And even though it's probably not your fault, it's still your responsibility to see it and change it, which is what you're doing. So now we just learn to choose instead of react. Oh, couldn't say enough about that. I've talked about that on video chats and blogs, and my goodness, on and on. When we react, we're in prison. It's involuntary. The fork in the leg. I stab you in the leg, and boy, you jump, scream, yell, whatever it is. You're not making a choice. Well, that's no fun. Not to mention the fork in your leg. It's seeing when we react, like with anger, and learning to choose. As soon as we are making choices, we are free. That's it. You continue. I had a great conversation with our daughter this morning. I used your suggested wording with only words that a tender, loving dad could give his daughter, and we were both deeply touched. She left with a look in her eyes that I had not seen in quite some time. It's kind of miraculous, huh? So keep going. Keep talking to me. Keep reading stuff. Keep practicing this. It's just really worth it. You conclude by saying, I know that the trial is not over. It's up to me to consistently lead only in the loving way. Brilliant. Don't have a thing to add. I'll be here for you. Just keep practicing. Bless you. New subject. Here's somebody who writes and says, I tried explaining real love to a friend, but all he could do was judge it like an intellectual exercise, finding fault with words or phrases or logic. I didn't know what to do. See, he's judging feelings and beliefs and a different way of living with his intellect. So he's judging feelings and beliefs with his head, which would be like judging the quality of a symphony by how it smells. Ridiculous. He's using completely the wrong instruments to make his judgments about something that can't be judged in that way. And yet people do it all the time. How many times have I heard, I don't believe in unconditional love? And I'm thinking, well, duh, you've never seen it. So why would you? But then they say, it can't exist. You don't believe in it. That makes sense. But it can't exist because you haven't seen it? That would be like me saying Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, doesn't exist because I haven't been there. No, doesn't make sense, even to a logical person. Love is a transcendent feeling and a choice and a way of living, and the mind alone cannot comprehend or orchestrate it. Again, love is a transcendent feeling and choice and way of living, and the mind alone cannot comprehend or orchestrate it. So, what could you do with your friend? Instead of refuting the logic step by step, which you could do to your dad, because again, he's telling you about the smell of the symphony orchestra. Pfft, ridiculous. You just tell him how love has changed your life. Demonstrate with your behavior. You can't do that in a single meeting, but over time you can. You demonstrate with your behavior the fruits of feeling loved and being loving. A woman was here recently, and she's been in therapy, had been in therapy, let's just say decades. Lots of therapy, lots of tricks and techniques and blah, 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 blah. And her life was still miserable. And she was tempted to explain to people what she was going to do when she came here to learn more about real love. And she went, I don't think I can explain this. But her behavior changed. She really got it. I mean, she really is healing. She went home and she was transformed. Whereas she was previously angry all the time. In her own words, at work, swearing like a sailor. She was fearsome. When they had a particular vendor or whatever who was behind on schedule, they would ask her to call the vendor because she would, throw the fear of God into them. Her anger was that ferocious, fiery. And now people are going, what's different with you? What's changed about you? They can't quite put their finger on it, but she's different. Her dogs are more affectionate toward her. People can feel the energy of loving. It's pretty cool. That's how you teach people about real love. Yeah, you can use some words, but if you don't demonstrate it, they're going to go, who cares? New subject. My 10-year-old son, Tommy, often exaggerates or lies about things he's done or what he knows. So, for example, he'll say, oh, I know this road, when we've never been there before. He'll say, my best score on a game was 27,000, and I almost made number one, like, I guess, in the world. I don't know. don't know video games. And then the number one guy just beat me, talking about a computer game, where the dad happens to know he's never even gotten close to that score. So the kid's just making it up. Or he'll say, I scored 3 runs in runs or points or, whatever, in baseball or football or soccer or whatever, when the truth is he scored 1. And he says it was 3. Or he'll say, I know about something that, this is the father speaking, something I'm telling him, which I know he doesn't know. Oh, yeah, I know. Now, this is the father still speaking. He also loves to explain things to other kids when they haven't asked and probably don't want his input. It can be irritating, and it can also make him look really foolish when he's caught in his lies. When he says, oh, I know, and then somebody says, oh, really? Well, then tell me more about it. That's when know-it-alls look really stupid. They don't know. The father says, I know I taught him this. I catch myself doing it sometimes, and sometimes to him. It's a way of proving my worth by trying to look clever or skillful or smart or better. It's something I watch for now, and I stop whenever I catch myself. What are the dangers of this for my son? That's really a good question. Well, and what are the dangers for you? If he lies about little things, like 3 goals or points versus 1, nobody's going to die. They're not going to take away the gold cup from him. It's unlikely he got one. But the lying gets easier, and then he can't stop. I know many such people. They almost create like an alternate universe where they're the king of the place. Why? Because they're in pain in the real world. That's the only reason. They're not bad. They are not liars. You don't label somebody a liar. That's not who they are. No, you say when they're in pain, they protect themselves by lying. Like when I stab you in the leg with a fork. We don't say, wow, you're really a spastic sort of screamer. No, that's how you react to pain. Dad says, is there more to why he does this? Yeah, he's just not feeling happy. And his accomplishments and his knowledge and his know-it-all stuff makes him feel important. So Dad says, what's the best response when I know he's lying or when he's giving unrequested advice? Tell him what his gifts are. We're going to talk about this more probably in another video chat. We'll see. Talk to him about his gifts, what he does well, who he really is when he's not in pain. Most kids have never heard this. In fact, because the father and I talked by Skype, talk to him about the gifts that we talked about today. For example, he has great creativity. Seeing the link? And he has a large soul. He's just a big soul. He doesn't live small. And he has kind of an ethereal, not blocky, solid presence, which goes along with being creative. That's not a bad thing. These are all gifts. They're great. He tends to think big. All of these gifts, they're all good. Now he simply needs to be aware that these gifts will hurt him if he uses them in ways that are not true or when he's afraid. So you take somebody who's really creative and you make them afraid. What are they going to do? Come up with creative lies. You take somebody who thinks big, bold, and you confront them with what they don't know. They'll make up even bigger lies. Every gift we have becomes just a disaster when we're afraid. Now we use those gifts to protect ourselves and in the process, hurt the people around us and hurt us. We've talked about this subject before. We're going to probably talk about it again because, wow, there are a lot of ways to come at this. And you tell him all this with an utterly calm tone of voice. You're teaching him and loving him, reminding him that he simply, so you said, what do we do when he lies? You remind him that he's a big soul, that he's creative, that he has an ethereal kind of sense. and that he doesn't want to use his gifts in any way that would spoil them. And then you point out what he lied about. You don't ask him if he lied. You just say, so when you told this story, you were being creative, but in a way that would protect you, not a way that would express you or enlarge you. Emphasize his goodness. Oh, I rarely see a parent teach a child in this way. It's pretty astonishing. This is from a blog. I don't usually read blogs, but every once in a while, some people don't read. They just don't. They say, I don't ever read anything. And so they only listen to audiobooks and they watch video chats or listen to them on their, I would name a device, but I would name a device that was 3 generations old. I'd never keep up. I'll say that the books are available on blank, and Donna looks at me and goes, they were 12 years ago. The story is about Jack and Meredith. It's a real story. Really happened. They went to a museum. Why? The avowed goal of going to the museum was to spend some time together, to enjoy each other. Sounds good so far. After arriving, Jack walked much faster than Meredith. So he was always ahead of her. He spent less time with each painting or whatever the exhibit was. So soon he was far ahead of her. In fact, he was in the next room. So they were like not together. It's hard to do that when you're in the next room. She told him that she wasn't enjoying herself. And he immediately countered with a defense by requesting that he could just, look 3 or 4 exhibits ahead. Why should that bother you? Would you mind if I look 3 or 4 exhibits ahead? And she said, well, we came here to see the museum together, side by side, not to see the museum consecutively apart, but concurrently together. And soon this erupted into an argument that led to canceling the remainder of the outing. So we went from let's do this together to not doing it together to not doing. Full stop. So who's right here in this circumstance? Who's wrong? What should they do? Is there a compromise that could be reached? They were baffled. They ended up just going home and sulking in separate rooms. Is there a solution? When 2 people do almost anything, one of them is taller, one is faster, one is stronger, one is more artistic, one's more mathematical, one is smarter, and so on. Unavoidable. Almost never are 2 people equal in one thing, much less everything. It's inevitable then that couples of any kind, when I say couples, I mean spouses, lifetime partners who are not married, a parent and child, any 2 people who are interacting are partners in that moment. They will have different preferences for any given activity. Duh. So who gets to choose? Boy, some of these situations appear to be utterly insoluble. Really, people just shake their head baffled. I want to do this. She wants to do that. So, well, I guess we don't get to do anything. Or they reach a compromise in between and they're both miserable. Compromises pretty much imply that you both lose. So let's take an easy situation as an illustration of how we might approach the more complicated one here with these 2. Whose names I've already forgotten. Years ago, my grandson, Brad, who was then about, 6, he was helping me to unload some material from the back of the van into the trailer of the ATV. Turns out the ATV is featuring prominently here. The bags of dry concrete, when we got to them, weighed 80 pounds. And Brad, at age 6, found it pretty difficult to hold one end of the bag, especially since I was taller, which dumped more weight on him. See? That's just physics and vectors. He could, however, hold one end of a 40-pound bag of topsoil and help me throw that into the ATV. So would it have been reasonable for me to insist that Brad help me unload the concrete? After all, he did agree to help me, just like Jack and Meredith agreed to go to the museum together. And with all of his strength, he could briefly hold up one end of the bag, but not throw it into the ATV. So would it have been reasonable, because he promised, sort of. I mean, if you say you're going to do something, it's a promise. I've heard that argument many times. I didn't promise. If you said you were going to do it, yes, you did. So he said he'd help. Would it have been reasonable for me to insist that he fulfill his promise? No. Because in any joint activity, I would suggest that the first rule is, in Latin, primum non nocere. A Latin expression that translates into English as first do no harm, most often applied to the practice of medicine. If it is avoidable, we never cause harm to another person. So why would I ever insist that anybody participated in an activity that caused them harm, which includes discomfort of their muscles, the weight, joints, in the case of the 6-year-old, the weight and twisting, ears, playing music really loudly in a room when it bothers somebody else, smell, I smoke and they're sensitive to smoke, or anything else. Exactly when would it be necessary to cause actual harm to another human being? When would that be necessary? When I was a surgeon, it turns out you do have to cause some harm in order to do good. When I've had surgery on me, I know from the outset they're going to hurt me. Well, I'm happy for it because the end result is good. This does not include, not hurting people, the emotional harm that a child might claim, for example, in being required to clean his room. The creative children will say that, but you're hurting my feelings. Yeah, well, gee, I'm very sad about that. So would it have been reasonable for me to insist that Brad and I alternate bags of concrete and soil so that he was overloaded only half the time? No, still not. See, that's a compromise. Well, we'll just alternate. Well, it's a compromise, but he still loses. Again, first, do no harm. Continuing to insist that Brad be like me, 4 times his size and accustomed to heavy loads, would definitely have increased the risk of injuring his body and likely his feelings, as he failed to lift the bags and, probably dropped his end and spilled concrete dust all over the driveway, which is really messy. So we understand that. No harm to the 6-year-old. Pretty much everybody's got that, right? Nobody would say, toughen up, kid. No, we wouldn't. Now, back to Jack and Meredith. Jack had longer legs than Meredith, for one thing, and could walk faster. Insisting on her keeping his pace would cause her unnecessary exertion or harm. He had less interest in seeing each exhibit, so his rushing around also caused her the discomfort of not seeing what she had come to see. Most important, though, was that they had agreed that the primary purpose of the museum visit was to do something together, and Jack unilaterally chose to move at a pace that would leave Meredith behind, contributing to her wondering whether she was as important as his checking off each exhibit he visited. Because he said, well, I wanted to see everything. Do we get an award for that? I mean, when you leave the museum, does the curator go, everybody, Jack saw every single exhibit in the museum? Yeah, pretty much. I'm sure that they don't do that. In short, Jack's approach to museums prevented Meredith from enjoying the experience. He was hurting her. Well, what about Meredith? Was she hurting Jack? Because we need to look at that. Walking 15% slower, because that's actually generous. She was probably only walking if you walk 8% slower than somebody, in no time at all, they're at the other end of the museum, and you're nowhere. let's make it big. Walking 15% slower couldn't possibly be painful to Jack, could it? No. Just like my making the load lighter on Brad couldn't possibly hurt him. It may not be what he prefers. I would have preferred that Brad be bigger and be able to single-handedly throw 80-pound bags of concrete. But he couldn't. So Meredith's pace may not be what Jack preferred, but it doesn't hurt him. First, do no harm. See? Didn't hurt him. If Jack spent 10% longer looking at each painting, would that hurt his eyes? Having been an eye surgeon for 20 years, pretty sure no. Would it hurt his mind? No. Would it offend his incredibly superficial and arrogant sense of I saw every exhibit in the museum? Maybe, but that's not hurting him. That's just a ridiculous preference that he move at that speed. No, he simply can't see as much of the museum superficially as he had envisioned. Harm? Nah, no harm, zero. Does his slowing down hurt his relationship with Meredith? We're still looking for harm. No, in fact, quite the contrary. His slowing down helps Meredith feel close to him. Jack was expressing preferences. Now pay attention. This is what it comes down to. First, do no harm. Jack was expressing preferences and Meredith was expressing discomforts. We talked about this in a video chat one ago, where we talked about the husband who played the really loud music and political commentary while his wife tried to sleep. So he made his preference trump her harm. She couldn't sleep. She spent all day long sleep deprived. Harm trumps preferences every time. Real harm. You can't just go, it hurts my feelings because you have to do something that's necessary. So Meredith was expressing discomfort. First, do no harm. When your partner is talking about something that is uncomfortable or prevents closeness, listen. Listen. First, do no harm. Never place your own preferences above your partner's comfort. Now, it has to be real. You can't fake it. You can't every time you don't get your way, go, oh, I'm hurt. No. See, that's just victimhood and manipulation. Pain trumps preferences in nearly every case. TV channels, for example, two people get together and they're going to watch TV together. I choose a particular movie and I put it up and I can tell in no time at all, Donna will either say something or I can see it in her face. She really would hate watching that. Like, hate it. I can't think of a single movie that I need to see where not seeing it would hurt me. You see? Otherwise, well, I'd be sitting right here and just say, I've got to go. I've got to watch this movie. I couldn't finish this video chat. There's no such thing. So if she's even uncomfortable seeing a movie for whatever reason, it's in black and white, it's too old, it's too violent, it's too stupid, who cares? Well, then we find something that we can both watch, both enjoy, both are not uncomfortable with, and we choose it freely. Neither one of us goes, oh, okay. No, that's harm. It's not worth it. We go to Disney World. This was years ago. And I just tend to walk through things and look at the flowers and the exhibits. And I discovered an entirely new pace because Donna takes pictures of stuff. So I discovered a new way of walking. You take 2 steps and you stop and you take a picture, and then you take 3 steps and you stop and you take a picture. And initially I was going, this is really stupid. No, it's really not. She likes doing this. Zipping through, this is just like Jack and Meredith, zipping through Disney World without taking pictures that she could share with the kids. She likes to do that. Look at later, relive the experience, would have been less enjoyable. Now, listen slow. Less enjoyable is the same as more uncomfortable. And it didn't hurt me to stop. In fact, I got more out of every time I stopped. I saw the flowers better. I saw patterns in the flowers I didn't see before. I got to watch ripples in the water and patterns in people and human behavior that normally I would have walked right on by. First, do no harm. If you're doing harm, the activity is no good. Unless, of course, the person agrees on it, like when I get operated on. Boy, this solves all kinds of apparently unsolvable problems. No kidding. Here's somebody who writes and says, my teenage daughter, Allison, is in a class this year with a teacher who she says creeps her out. The way he looks at her, talks to her, singles her out in a group of 4 girls in the class. She said she could change classes, which is a very reasonable thing. First, do no harm, remember? But you don't get to impose first do no harm on somebody else. No, I live by the principle of do no harm. I don't want to cause harm to other people, but if you go around telling people they're hurting you and they have to stop, you can sometimes. You're in an elevator and somebody's smoking, you get to say in every building in this country at least, yeah, it's against the law to smoke here. But you don't get to impose your discomfort on every single soul you know. So back to the creepy teacher. She could change classes, but he's the instructor for other classes that she would like to take. Wise. So you throw him out the window now, but you need him later. That's not going to work. The parent continues. I had this teacher when I was in school. So now we know he's not, 24 years old. And a bunch of girls in one of my classes signed documents as part of a sexual harassment investigation. Or some people say harassment. Turns out they're both right. After which he was either fired or resigned. So this isn't a one-time event. Apparently he really is somewhat creepy. So what is my next step with this? What do I do? This is the parent. Unless he does something overt, like makes a comment about her appearance, an inappropriate comment, not nice hair, something inappropriate, or touches her, or makes a sexual joke or reference, you do nothing. You do nothing, she does nothing. He's just creepy. So he looks at her, whatever. I hate to say it, but kind of welcome to the world where men tend to look at women as objects. Take a look at any magazine on the racks, and women willingly sell themselves as sex objects. They do. Women often call it cute or attractive, but they're selling sex, and men are only too happy to buy it. This is simply a life lesson that you, her dad, need to teach her. She must learn to deal with this. She's going to have to deal with it all of her life, but she never has to deal with actual harassment. And you're going to teach her the difference. People just look at her, well, what are you going to do? Wear a black box over you? You didn't specify what the way he talks to her means. So you can talk about that, or how he singles her out. If there's anything sexual about it, then I would recommend that she actually carry a cell phone to record what he says. Really. But if he's just creepy, well, she can't stop that all of her life out in the world. There's going to be, no shortage of creepy people. She just as well learn that now. She's going to see it forever. We can't make all people good. Can't even make them uncreepy. We can make them do things or stop doing things that are illegal. And it turns out sexual harassment is. Teach her the difference. It would be empowering to her. So she doesn't feel frightened by creepiness, and she knows that there's a line he can't cross. It's cool. New subject. A mother had a child who had a habit of screaming in the middle of the night to get attention. We're not talking about screaming, because they fell out of bed or there was a burglar climbing through the window. No, screaming in the middle of the night, and she'd go in there and the child would say, my water bottle, because she leaves water there so he doesn't scream about that. My water bottle is only half full. Gee, that's a pity. I don't know where my rhinoceros toy is, whatever. In other words, nothing that is urgent. She tried all kinds of things. Eventually, I asked, does he whine during the day? So nighttime is really a pretty terrible time to deal with things. Everybody's upset. They're sleep deprived. It's just it's almost like an altered state, waking up from sleep. Does he whine during the day? And she said, well, and I said, yes, he does. How do I know? I said, isn't that him, his voice? We're talking on Skype. Isn't that him in the next room talking to his brother? She said, yeah. I said, that's called whining. I don't even understand the words, but it's an absolutely unmistakable sound. Everybody on earth, if you say whine, makes a pretty similar noise. That has to stop. And it will make a difference in the nighttime behavior. Whining is an attitude. And that's what he's doing at night when he screams. Tell him that it's just not effective. It doesn't work. Take an old toy, like an old car, and have him, with a pair of pliers or whatever, pry the wheels off and compare the sound between sliding the car with no wheels on a flat surface to a car that has wheels. That's how he sounds when he whines. The sound without wheels is just screechy and just terrible. He'll get the picture. Kids love practical examples, especially if they're the least bit funny. All day long, she writes me and she says, all day long, he has been deliberately play whining, pretending, so that I will make a screeching car noise, and we're having fun with it, and it's sinking in. A moment ago, we spoke about how lucky he is to be learning about what leads to happiness and what doesn't. And he said this is the kid who'd been disturbing his family with whining and screaming for, well, up to this point, all of his life. He said to his mother, I'm happy. I think I'll be a dad who gets to teach my kids this, just like you taught me. You're kidding. This is from whining and screaming to, I think I want to be a good father. Priceless. This is from a 20-year-old young man whose parents required him to move out of the house. And he said, I suppose I'm emailing you because I feel lost. When we're lost, that means we don't know where we are or what we're doing. Or where we're going. That's what lost means. Somehow we weren't taught what we needed or given the ability to figure out the map. And because I happen to know you, I can say with certainty that you missed out on learning some important lessons. You have an incomplete map. You learned a lie instead. You learned that you could choose to do anything you wanted, but you did not learn that there's always a price for your choice. Example, I've known you for a couple of years. All through high school, you put off studying for everything. Every test, every end of the year exam, every standardized test. And then at the end of school, you found, surprise, that your grades sucked. And your choices of colleges were very limited. And you were actually surprised because you hadn't been taught what happens when you choose badly. You were often rude to your mother and sometimes other people in the family over and over, despite being warned. You were even told that if you kept it up, you'd be required to live elsewhere. But somebody always saved you. They let it go. They gave you another chance. They thought they were being kind. So you just thought you were getting away with your choices. Again, like with the studying. Until now, like as in a few days ago, when they finally told you that they couldn't live with your negative critical comments anymore. So you didn't experience your consequences until now. And now you're surprised. You're miserable, your words, lost, because you're learning that you really do have to pay the price for your choices. You're surprised and you don't like it. You continue. I've moved out of the house now and I'm staying with a friend. He's a few years older and has always had to live on his own from 18 and has always had a hard-working nature. It may seem subtle, but look how you dismiss his success by saying that he has a hard-working nature. That's just who he is. I'm just not like that. Maybe, but you seem to think that work is something that you're either born to do or you're just not. Yeah, that's not going to teach you anything. So what do you need to learn? You need the map. I'm giving you a piece of the map now to stick into your relatively absent map. You chose to do whatever you wanted all your life, and you hope that somehow success would fall from the sky. Your friend is simply reaping the rewards of his choices, but part of you thinks it's because of his nature. Truth? We reap what we sow. He is, and so are you. It's a law, in fact, law of the harvest. You continue. We keep having talks, my friend and I, and he's saying that I should stop lounging around because here at his place, I just watch TV all day. And his point is that the reason my parents asked me to leave is for me to learn something, not just sit around all day. So here he is teaching you the same lesson. And then you continue, which I agree with. You agree in your head, but then you don't do anything. And that's a long habit. In your defense, it's what you were taught. Your mother saved you from responsibility. She allowed you to make your excuses. Your father couldn't love you and didn't know how to teach you except to criticize, so he gave you money. He lectured, but he didn't teach with allowing you to experience consequences of your choices, so you learned to do as little as you could. I am not criticizing you, baby. I'm showing you the map. I'm hoping to teach you something that will save your life. You continue. I've noticed that at the end of these choices, or these chats with my friend, I just kind of feel bad about myself. And well, of course, because you're not fulfilling who you really are. We talked about this earlier in this chat. The father who was going to teach his son about lying by saying it's not how his real gifts would naturally manifest, that they're corrupted. So you ask, so really what I'm asking you is, what am I trying to learn while I'm being away from home? Happiness comes from three things, kid. Always does. As I've taught many times, feeling loved, being loving, and being responsible. Learn that. You're paralyzed by fear. Because of poor choices, you're just generally afraid. So instead of facing your fear and becoming more competent and confident, learn to implement the three legs of the stool. Feeling loved, being loving, being responsible. Instead of doing that, you use your fear as an excuse to just stop doing anything, not study, quit your job, all kinds of things that you do. He responded with a second email to what I said. I was pretty direct, more direct actually than I read here. There was more to it. He said, I didn't like it, but you woke me up. Well, cool. We'll see. What really hit home is that you said you were trying to teach me something that would save my life. That really hit me between the eyes. The only reason I've remained alive in my life is because of the work of other people, and I've done the least I could. Yes, and it's a pattern. He said, so I got up at 7 a.m. today, and I filled my day with more productive things, and I feel happier. Well, bless you. You conclude with, thanks for helping me open my eyes. Well, you're welcome. You appear to be listening, at least to start. And parenthetically, for everybody who's listening, he got another job. So now he's working full time, a better job. He's being more responsible. It's been a full, week now that he's been more responsible. So now we see it's a good start. He's following parts of the map now that lead somewhere that he's going to like. And he's a good example for all of us of being willing to learn and move. He allowed the possibility that I was bringing love to this situation. I was bringing love and also teaching him, but he trusted that. And whenever we bring more love to a situation, whenever we're more loving, everything turns out better for us and for everybody around us. We'll see you in a week.